Very good. Today's guest is an interesting one. He's a mental health advocate, he's polyamorous, he's an atheist, he's a world traveller, and he's a cat lover. Need we say any more?
Need we say more? Let's get into it.
The Brown Podcast.
So today's guest has over 500,000 followers on Instagram, was up to 3 million on TikTok before he got banned.
I struggle with depression, and the question I get asked is, why don't you snap out of it if you're just fucking sad? I'll tell you now, that is not how fucking depression works. You cannot fix it by dismissing it, that makes it worse. There's not always a fucking reason why I am depressed. It may just be that chemically I am just fucking stressed. So if you have depression, man, I feel your fucking pain. You need to know that there is hope, you're not fucking insane.
And we've got him as a guest, the guy with the hair, Josiah Frazier. Hello.
Hello, guys. How are you?
Very good.
Wow, that was pretty good. You guys did that on cue.
Yeah, didn't we?
Yeah, right. We're professionals.
We're harmonising over here.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
Mate, where are you? You're in LA at the moment?
I am near LA. Yeah, right outside of LA in Bakersfield, California. Yeah.
And you've established yourself online very quickly as like a mental health advocate who sings.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a crazy thing, man. But yeah, it's I guess that would be the best way to describe it for sure.
How do you just get like? What was your progression on social media that you went? You know what? I'm just going to sing essentially the same song about different subjects, and it'll annoy some people, but it'll bring light to other things. And how did it all come about? What got you to that point?
Well, at first it annoyed almost everyone, and
Yes.
and so that was kind of how it started. A buddy of mine back in October of 2020 during the pandemic, in the heart of it, I had been doing some like parodies and just silly stuff on Facebook, and I've always liked to write songs. I've always, and I've been in bands for years, and I like to write music, even though I'm a drummer. But anyway, so like my friend, he dared me to get on TikTok, and I was like, nah, I'm not really about it. And then he's just kept pushing me to do it. And so for about 6 months, I just didn't do it. And then I finally got on Caved, and I remember at first I was posting like, because I mean, here in America, it was during the time of our election in 2020, and so we had a bunch of content for people that wanted to create content, because there was a bunch of shit going on. So as you guys probably know, and so so I was kind of harping on that, but nobody really gave a shit. And then I remember I came home one day, and this girl had done that song. It was that tune, because that was a trend on TikTok at that time, I guess. Yeah. And I didn't even know what trends were. I was just like, okay, this is cool. Like, it's catchy. And so I wrote my own song to it, and it blew up. And then I wrote another song to that same tune, and it blew up. And within 6 months, I had over 3 million followers on TikTok. And so it was insane, and I didn't know what I had. But I was singing not so much about mental health at that time. It was more so politically, religious. I'm an atheist, so it was a lot of religious-based stuff, and just divisive things that people, really polarizing shit.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah.
And so, but things that I felt like society needed to see. I love holding a mirror up to society,
Yeah.
And so, my account got banned.
What happened with that? How come it got banned?
Honestly, bro, so if you want the truth, the only answer that I got told by TikTok after reaching out to them hundreds of times was that they called me a violent extremist.
What?
And yeah, it was really ridiculous, bro, like really ridiculous. And so that played a really that between my first and second account on TikTok, that really played it was a huge blow to my mental health. And so I was in probably the darkest place I've been in years. And because I mean, I didn't know what I had when I grew so quickly, and then when it got taken away in a second, it was just like, what the fuck? And so so then it took a few months and started another one, got up to 1.6 million followers in a couple months, and then got that one banned. And
Same reason?
But during Yeah, pretty much. Well, no, this one, I was a little more careful with the second one because I was like, okay, I'm not going to be so divisive. And this is when I actually started talking about more mental health things, more things I cared about. And I was also at the same time building up my Instagram. And so the Instagram took off with one of the songs that I did and really, really blew up. And so I started focusing on Instagram, but I got hired to do a CBD song by his name's Joe Vargas. He's one of the biggest CBD distributors in America, and he hired me to do a song about CBD for one of his companies. And so I did that, and I posted it everywhere. It was all fine except for TikTok. And I posted that one song on TikTok. I had no previous violations on that account. And a couple days later, they banned my account because of that song. And even though it's legal everywhere in the United States. And so it was ridiculous. So that was back, in January of this year. And so I just recently, in the past week, got a third TikTok account. I broke down. I had to buy a new phone. The phone that I'm on now, I had to buy a new iPhone, and because they block your IP address whenever they block your account. And so I had to go buy a new phone. And I've had it for 9 days now, and I'm doing really well, and I'm really cautious about it. Like, just, I'm just like, fuck, I'm not going to post anything that, so yeah.
Did you still get paid for the CBD oil TikTok, even though you got banned?
Yeah. I mean, he hired me to pay, and then so that was the fucked up thing, was that in the first account, I had at least $6,000 in my account, and the way TikTok works is that you get paid a month after the end of the month of that month. You get paid 30 days after that, and so it just sits there for a while and it accumulates. And so I had at least $6,000 in there, and when they ban my account, you lose all that money.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah. So that happened twice. So the first one was about $6,000. And the second one, I had about $2,000 or $3,000 in there, and I hadn't been able to pull it out yet because the date hadn't come yet, and it just fucking sucked.
So how does that work? How do you get, are you an actual creator on TikTok that they pay you to do that?
Yeah.
Because you're getting 7 million followers.
Yeah, absolutely. So on TikTok, even right now, I'm getting about 2 or 3 million 2 or 3 million views a day, and so that translates, to now it's roughly $50 to $100 a day. So, over time, it just accumulates. And then Instagram as well, just recently, yesterday, they started paying for views as well. And so, yeah, it's definitely a thing. There's definitely a way to make a living on social media, and you just have to really buckle down and understand the logistics of it all,
So does that mean now you're just going to do TikToks about unicorns and fairies just to be safe?
Yeah, well, but even then they'll be like, well, you're posting fake news, so
you can't do that mythological creatures.
Yeah, that's bullshit. You can't do that.
So the ones that got you banned in the first place, because you said you're an atheist, what were the things you were talking about? You're saying, fuck religion and all that kind of thing, or was it?
Yeah, well, I mean, essentially, I wrote a song. It was called the Religion Song, and it was so my first account got banned because of a culmination of videos. So it was violation after violation after violation, whatever, and then they finally just banned it. Yeah. But with the Religion Song, it was definitely. I'm very excited. My family is very much so, Christian, religious, and I grew up. My dad's a pastor. I grew up religious. I just recently became an atheist, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I don't in any way disrespect or seek to disrespect those that are religious, because I understand what it is to be religious, because most of my life I have been. And so it's the song that I wrote was basically, I didn't say oh, fuck you if you're religious. I said, I fucking hate religion. But pretty much just don't shove it down my throat,
Yeah.
And let's live in a pluralistic society where, religion, you can be free to practice, because it's no secret in America that Christianity has a pedestal over anything.
It does.
And so,
God-fearing nation, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it's not, but they say it is. Yeah, it's funny that people think that it was founded on Christian values when it really wasn't. Yeah. But so it's really interesting, and so it was one of those times when I just really wanted to hold a light up to society and hold a mirror up and say, hey, look. Like, this is what it is. Like, because I'm a pragmatist, so I look at the world. I try to look at the world in a very, pragmatic and realistic way as much as I can, and base my beliefs around them. And I'm an evidentialist as well. So, I mean, like, my atheism, and that's one of the biggest misconceptions about atheism, is that people think that we're just a bunch of, like, God-hating heathens that worship Satan and, all this stuff. And it's not. My atheism, I don't say that there is no God. I'm just not convinced that there is a God. Yeah. And so there's a difference there. So I guess you would classify that as agnostic atheist. But yeah.
Do you believe, then going into that, do you believe in the afterlife and all that?
No.
Okay.
No, because so the time. So for me, the time, I'm an evidentialist. So the time to believe something is when there's evidence to warrant that belief. Yeah. And so there's no evidence. Actually, there's evidence against an afterlife. They've done what is it? There was a foundation that's done tests about not only the afterlife, but or near-death experiences, which is the closest we can get to, some kind of afterlife, or the prayer, stuff like that. And it's interesting with the afterlife and near-death experiences. People really, generally, they only see the deistic figure that they were raised to believe in when they're going through that NDE or whatever. It's really fascinating stuff.
Did you hear there was a scientist the other day who was he was an atheist, did not believe whatsoever, had a near-death experience, and was literally brain dead to 2%. There was no sign of life. He was literally gone. Mm-hmm. And he has come back now saying there is something.
Yeah.
And he was a staunch atheist. Like, he was like, no, you're dead and buried. That's it. You're gone. And he said he went there. He was there. He saw it with his own spirit, I guess. And has come back and he's gone, no, I take everything back. I am now a believer.
But see, I mean, I question that too. Is that the drugs that they were feeding into him at the time, making him hallucinate or something like that? So, yeah.
So, and David Hume, who was a really famous philosopher centuries ago, he said, revelation is necessarily first person. And so pretty much saying that, like, yeah, that's great that, you have these anecdotal evidence of this happened to me and this happened to me. And it's great. But the point of evidence isn't to just convince yourself. It is to be a collective convincing of others. So how can you take what your personal revelation is and convince someone else that believes something vastly different than you? That's where I believe there's a warrant for belief.
Yeah. And that's how wars start.
True.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yeah.
On your bio, you say you're polyamorous.
Yes.
So what does that look like? What?
So I'm still figuring that out myself. So that's an interesting one, because that one, I came out as poly probably about a year after I came out as atheist. So you can imagine everyone that grew up around me was like, what the actual fuck is happening with this guy? And I just if you would have known me 4 years ago, I would have been a completely different person. So polyamory, essentially, for me, it's defined in different ways. One of the biggest misconceptions is that it's the same as polygamy, and I repudiate polygamy. I think that it's disgusting and fundamentally immoral. But I think that polyamory is essentially like, so the way I see it is that we are an evolved mammalian species that, we put these societal parameters around what we should and shouldn't do, and love, and monogamy, and all these things. So monogamy pretty much says, you're supposed to. It isn't just like an instinctual thing. It's a moral thing. It's a societally in place moral thing of like, you have to be with one person at one time, and that's it. Even though there's evidence to like, and I believe that this is a big, and not to say that monogamy can't work and doesn't work, because it does, and it's a beautiful thing. But you have to look at like why people, in a general sense, they cheat, they go outside of marriages, they do these things. Why is that? And I like to look at the fundamental reasons why people do what they do. And it's really fascinating when you get down to the psychology of it. And so for years, I always like, when I was in relationships, I was, of course I felt like, oh, I should just be with one person. And it was like, but I always like connected, not always sexually, but it's not just a sexual thing. It can be, emotional. It can be psychological. It can be, just someone to converse with, or just something that you connect with someone. So it's essentially letting your heart connect, proverbially, letting your heart connect with whomever it will. Yeah. And sometimes it can be one person. Like right now, I am just with this girl who's all the way across the country from me. Her name is Molly. I go and visit her sometimes. She lives in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and I live in California, and it's great. I love her to death, and she's my best friend, and she's satisfied. She fulfills what, me right now. Like, that's it. But if there were to be someone that came around that, like, maybe down the road something happens that I connect with someone else, and the other thing is that it's honesty too. So openly being communicative with your partners, and whatever that may entail. So it's essentially just like letting your heart do what it will, and being respectful and open with whoever you're involved with. Because if I'm poly and I make it seem like, oh, I'm just going to be with you, and then I go off and do other things, that's to me, that's immoral. Like, that is immoral. But if I tell you from the jump, like, hey, I am polyamorous, I don't put restraints on like who I connect with naturally and inherently, then it's on them to decide whether they want to be in the relationship.
And is Molly poly?
She is. So she's. When I met her, she didn't know. She hadn't really thought about it. But she actually is. It's interesting that since I've been poly, every person that I've been quote unquote involved with, they start to question whether they're poly or not. And it's actually 2 or 3 people have actually officially come out as poly because I've quote unquote dated them, and they say, like, holy shit, like this is exactly what I am, and this is, and so it's a beautiful. And someone actually, there's a girl in San Diego that was the reason. I've actually never met her. We talked online. She was the reason that I embraced polyamory, and because she explained it to me, and it fit exactly with how I had felt for years, and I just didn't know how to define it. I'm
going to go and tell my wife that.
that might not go over very well.
Can I be there when you do that?
Hey, honey.
Yeah,
guess what?
That would be an interesting podcast.
Kids, sit down. Your dad's going to bring his girlfriend in for a while.
No, and look. I mean, I am all for. My little sister got married last year, and they are, man. If there was ever a monogamous couple that I just adore, it's them. And I absolutely believe in monogamy, and I think it can be a thing. My thing is that I just don't believe that it's inherent to what we are as Homo sapiens, as a human species. And so I kind of go with the more like inherent instinctual side. But I do absolutely subscribe to monogamy. It's just not me.
How does it work then if you were to, say, get one of your partners pregnant? And were you to start a family, but then still want to continue the pathway that you're on?
So that's actually an interesting question, because that's something that Molly and I are having discussed, because she actually has 2 kids before me, and she is not able to have kids anymore. So, and I do want a kid. I don't have any kids yet, and I do want a child in the near future, like within the next 5 years. And so that's something that we're talking about and trying to figure out right now, because, essentially I would want to have a child with, someone that would be a good mother and would want a child to be co-parents with, and so it's definitely an interesting route to take, but I'm excited about it, and I've never really taken the normal path, but I'm just staying true to who I am.
No, that's cool. Each to their own, isn't it? So I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, your vibe is very much each to their own. Do what you want to do, as long as you stay aligned with your own values.
Yes, and and there's a caveat to that as well. Like, also exactly that, and do not infringe on the rights and of other people.
Yeah.
And so, as long as you're not infringing on the rights and personal autonomy of other people, then I'm all for it. Like, do what you got to do, to be happy, to find fulfillment in this life.
This is the Brown Park Podcast with Christo and Dion.
This is the Brown Park Podcast.
But it's absolutely necessary.
What was the turning point? You said if we knew you 4 years ago, you wouldn't have been the same person that you are now. Did you have a turning point in your life that you sort of went, yep, this is it?
100%. And ironically, so as I mentioned before, my dad is a pastor, and we actually, unfortunately, have lost our relationship because of my atheism. But when I was 25, so about 8 years ago, I went on my first trip out of the country, and I went to, well, aside from Mexico, but that's right next door. But I went to Africa with my dad. Because he was being honored by a seminary, which is a place where they raise up young pastors to go out into the world or whatever. Because the church that he's here, in my town, is funding that seminary in Africa. So they actually named a building after him and everything, and so we went to go do that. And it was ironic that I look back on it now. I didn't know it at the time, but it did two things. It sparked an obsession with traveling for me. And ever since I've traveled, and that's literally my number one. When people ask, what is your number one priority in life, is traveling. That's it. Yeah. Because I think that's the best way to understand other people and to understand yourself. And so, but the second thing that it did was it sparked, it broke the glass, it shattered the glass of the blinders, so to speak, that I had on of, this is my way of thinking, and I don't accept any other way of thinking is valid. And it broke that kind of ignorance and bigotry. And just a little bit, though. I wouldn't say it broke it, it cracked it. And it was the first time that I saw a different people group with a vastly different way of living. Yeah. And it woke me up, and I can honestly say that traveling, to me, different people have different paths to how they get to different things. But to me, that trip, a mission trip, technically, was the spark to my atheism. So it was really interesting.
A religious trip sparked atheism. That's great.
100%. It's really weird to think about, but yeah, it absolutely did. Yeah.
And so where have your travels taken you? Because that's one of the things on your bio as well. It says world traveler.
Yeah. So I'm really excited to be traveling again. So after Africa, I was in Africa and Dubai for that trip. Then right after that, in 2018, I went to South Korea and China. And I went for the Winter Olympics back then, and that was incredible. And then after that, I took a trip to Ireland and Iceland. And then after that, and Denmark. And then after that, I went with my sister to Italy, London, and France. And so it was really great. And now I've planned a trip. I'll be going later this year to Germany, Belgium, Austria, and Switzerland.
Wow, nice.
And so, yeah, so I just I'm obsessed, man. And I wasn't able to travel these past few years just because of COVID. Everything was shut down, and I wanted to wait to, really reopen again, but finally able to go, and I'm stoked.
And I just want to circle back to when you said your TikTok account got banned the first time and you took a mental health hit. How did you work through that at the time and come out the other side of it and be doing these great things you're still doing?
So it's really interesting because I was not only in a dark place, it was kind of like a double hitter because when my TikTok account got banned, that same week, I had been on and off with this girl that I was absolutely crazy for about 3 years. And that ended really, really terribly one night about the same week as my TikTok got banned. Yeah. And it was devastating, bro. Like, I'm telling you that literally I would fall asleep just crying and my face in the couch just like almost every night for at least a month. And so one night I remember Molly, the girl I'm with now, she actually messaged me randomly. She just randomly messaged me and said, "Hey, I miss you on TikTok. I know you don't know me, but I love your stuff and it's great. And I hope you're okay. I know you're dealing with mental health stuff, and I really hope you're okay." And I get messages like that all the time, but I don't know, something about hers. I was literally face down in my couch, and I got that message, and we started talking, and it was just like a revival for me. I really, really credit Molly for helping me a lot with my rejuvenation to gain the strength to get back on social media and do what I love. And she's been such a great support system. So that and just a few other people, I think it's really important to have a good support system, and I've learned that in the past few years. Because we're social animals, and so we have to have people,
Is there something that you've dealt with your entire life with mental health, or is it just what was going on at that particular point in time?
So that was the interesting thing, is that like growing up in a religious family, and I'm not to say that every religious family is like this, because they're not, but with my dad especially, me and my mom have a great relationship. She's religious as well, but she's one of my best friends still to this day. But my dad is very, very strict, and I grew up a lot with him. And, being in that kind of environment, it's very much so, and this on a universal scale, I think, and what I've learned in the past year or two is, hearing from almost every country on the planet, is that, a lot of times your mental health is suppressed, and for whatever reason, for me it was like just the way I was raised, like, oh, just kind of, you're fine, like, just ignore it, like, you're just sad, like, you'll be okay, there's a reason, and whatever. And so I stuffed it really deep down, and I suppressed it for most of my life until my late 20s. And so it's really like such, it all coincides. So with my atheism, and this is just my personal experience, and maybe there's others that have experienced the same thing, but my atheism, polyamory, all this stuff, I finally have come in the past few years. I feel like I've been reborn, and it's just like I feel so liberated to be able to talk about the things that I know I've dealt with, but that I've suppressed for so long. And that can manifest itself in a lot of ways. People that overeat, people that drink, people that have these addictions, they stuff down, generally psychologically, they stuff down their emotions and replace it with something else to coincide with it, and eventually you have to deal with it. And I came to that reckoning a few years ago.
You have born agains in religion. You're a born again polyamorous atheist. That's really cool.
As I was saying it, I was like, wow, the double entendre.
Now, the other thing I want to mention is you are known for your hair. Your hair is your title. Is it natural? Do you curl it? What is it? Is it just
It's all natural, man.
All natural.
It's a fro. My dad, I got that from my dad. He had a fro when he was younger, and like it's definitely a talking point. I have such social anxiety, and so it's actually good because now, like, I don't know, like, people, I don't have to say really much because people are like, oh, like, I like your videos, whatever. There's a talking point. But before, people gave a shit about what I said, like, it was a talking point, and it was something to spark conversation, because like I'm so terrible with that. I'm so terrible with conversations, and so even to this day, so it's like, yeah, like but yeah, it's definitely all natural. And people, it's funny because people ask to like grab it. They're like, at least once every few weeks, I get someone that gains the courage to come up to me and ask me legitimately and honestly if it's a wig. And
what do you say? No, I'm not Donald Trump.
Say to that. Yeah, that's a hairpiece, guys. That's a hairpiece. Oh, Donald Trump. What do you? I mean, really, I know that this isn't my interview for you guys, but really quick, like. I would love to. I'd love to learn about. You guys are in Australia, yes?
Yeah.
So, so like, what is the general perception? And I have some friends that I've talked to in Australia about this, but like, as far as like what you guys see, like, what's the general consensus about people like Donald Trump and our conservative party and just politics in general?
Okay, don't get me started because I love American politics, and I love America. I love America, but the way that don't even. I'm with you, Donald Trump. Just Jesus Christ, somebody.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, I think he thinks he's Jesus Christ. And
Watching it on the sidelines from Australia, I was like, it's just like a joke gone too far. It's like this can't be.
Yes,
this can't be real life.
Yeah. It's crazy, man. And it's sad because with things like the vaccine and things like that, it's crazy that science got politicized in these past 2 years.
Totally.
And it's really, it's sad. It's not fun. Like you said, it's a bad joke that's gone too far. And it was funny before people started dying.
Yep.
And then when people started dying because of misinformation, it's not funny anymore. And it's sad.
I saw an interview with Trump, and he...
Oh, God, and
he said, if it wasn't for me, thousands of people would have died. I progressed this vaccine along by 10 to 12 years.
Of course he did.
And I'm like, man, do you have a selective fucking memory? Because I remember going back, if you go back a little, like, a year ago, longer than that, like 2 years ago, he was saying this wasn't a thing. It's the China virus. It's not a problem.
And it'll go away. It'll go away with the heat. Yeah. And
you should drink your disinfectant and bleach, and it'll just get rid of it all.
Can we just inject bleach and or drink it? Yeah. And it's really fascinating that on the one hand, Trump says, I am the reason for the virus, or for the cure. And on the other hand, he was spouting, that the vaccine is everything's a hoax, and this is all a hoax. And so he speaks out of both sides of his mouth, and he is literally the most detrimental thing that's ever happened to America, and even beyond Nixon, and that's saying something.
I like that you said he speaks out both sides of his mouth. I would dare say the other side of his body and down.
It's like watching a petulant child, for 5-6 years now. And it's so crazy because when in 2016, I actually saw him as the lesser of the two evils between him and Hillary.
Yeah.
And between him and Hillary Clinton. And I had no idea. I actually didn't vote in 2016 because I was like, I really can't in good conscience vote for either of them, but I actually would rather go for Trump. And I am disgusted at myself for even thinking that retrospectively,
Well, man, I want to thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thanks so much, mate.
Of course, man. Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me.
And when you're in Australia, mate, drop us a line and we'll take you out for a beer if you drink. If not, we'll take you out for a coffee.
Absolutely. Dude, I absolutely. What do you think has been in this mug?
No, mate, thank you very much. Josiah Frazier, the guy with the hair. You can find him on TikTok if he doesn't get banned again, and Instagram, and go and support him, mate. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you, guys. Cheers. I appreciate it.
The Brown Podcast.
Why are you happy?
Because I don't want to